High Performance Vet Pro Radio.
Welcome to High Performance Vet Pro Radio. Here, you will learn everything you need to know to become a high-performance veterinary professional. We will focus on optimizing your sleep, fitness, nutrition, mental performance, stress response, and work-life balance. Please enjoy these professional interviews with cutting-edge content from Dr. Jennifer Quammen and human performance coach Ryan Smith from hyperfliving.com.
Welcome back to another High Performance Vet Pro Radio special interview. And today's guest is another high performer in the veterinary profession and as well as in life. He's an author, speaker, inventor, musician, founder of the Animal Behavior Network, and from my personal experience, an all-around entertaining guy. I was introduced to Dr. Rolan Tripp when I was at the AVMA Council on Veterinary Services with Dr. Jen. And every time we've had a chance to sit down and talk, it's always been informative and entertaining. So I can expect a lot of fun things today. Now, as founder of the Animal Behavior Network, he consults with different veterinary practices. I know he's got over 100 practices that are a member of his Animal Behavior Network. And he's had the opportunity to be on Animal Planet. He's got the Video Vet program. He's got all different types of programs out there. But then he's also known as I guess you would be kind of known as a rock and roll drummer veterinarian, I guess, couldn't you?
Well, that would be a stretch, but
okay.
I do play drums and I do like rock and roll.
Okay, so that's kind of how I've gotten to know you, as well as then I guess as you were coming off of the Council of Veterinary Services, you actually taught everybody how to play a little drums on that last day. So
that was fun.
Yes. So needless to say, he's kind of successful in lots of areas. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Rolan Tripp to High Performance Vet Pro Radio.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you much. So kind of the purpose of why we do these special interviews in the show, sometimes it's interviews with people that are outside the industry that can kind of give us things that we can do to provide veterinary professionals, some new tools, some new things to think about. And then as well, we've got veterinary professionals such as yourself that have the opportunity to give some tips of people, whether they're new or students or whatever, kind of ways to kind of lead their life and to kind of perform well. We know a lot of people that in any profession just kind of get stuck in the everyday, and then there's people that are such as yourself that kind of take it beyond that just everyday practice kind of thing. And that's really what the goal is. We want to give people that thought process of how can they perform better in all parts of their life. And so we want people like yourself to be able to share their story and help to teach everybody how to be a little bit better in their life. So let's kind of go back a little bit and let's learn a little bit about you and how you've kind of gone through this whole process of becoming an animal behaviorist veterinarian and in the network that you developed. But let's go back to, you have a degree in music, right?
I do. I have a bachelor's degree in percussion, performance, and a minor in philosophy.
Okay, so you're the philosophy musician. The philosopher musician, I guess. So
actually, those are different things, and I value them very much because the philosophy, it's about concepts, and I think that anyone that's in the category that you're describing who wants to be successful has to understand that concepts are different. Concepts you can't weigh them, you can't measure them, you can't trade them. Sometimes you can trade them for money. But the point I'm getting at is that in philosophy, it's all about the search for truth in the non-material world, and that's an important concept. Yeah. Philosophy is the search for truth in the non-physical world. So whereas science is the search for truth in the material world. So science and philosophy, to me, always represent the two halves of the coin, the two parts of the whole, and from that standpoint, it's been very useful for me because in philosophy, let me give you an example. One of my interests is in ancient Greek philosophy, and that is going back to the time of Socrates, who was one of my main men. So Socrates never wrote anything down. He taught. He talked to people and gave concepts to his students, and his best student was called Plato. And Plato began writing stuff down. So one significant factor is that this, to me, represents the real difference between recorded history and not. It's a very eventful thing that happened between these two guys. Now, certainly it's bigger than that, but I mean, you can think of it that way. Mm-hmm. So Plato wrote everything down, and he often attributed a lot of his ideas to Socrates. But here's my point. Whatever those guys thought were true, the concepts of truth, whatever they thought was true 500 years before Christ, so 2,500 years ago or more, whatever they thought was true and reliable and is still true and reliable now, that's truth you can put in the bank. You can count on that to be truthful into the future as well.
Right.
Now, so things like fashion and news and so forth, those come and go, but the enduring truths of life are in philosophy, and so that's what's so valuable about philosophy.
I love it. Yeah. So that music and the philosophy are kind of the yin and the yang. One's in the here and now, and one is in the thoughts. Right. One's in the truth.
Well, when I was studying Socrates and his thoughts through Plato's writings, and Plato wrote a book called The Republic, and this book was very significant because in the Republic he talks about the ideal life. And the ideal life for a human in those days, and I would argue still may be true now, had three basic components. The big components were science and philosophy. The highest level that you could become in the Republic was a philosopher who dealt only with concepts and who dealt with the concepts of justice and truth and those kinds of very high level concepts. However, the other piece of it was, well, how do you get to there? And so one step below the philosopher was the scientist, because they studied how things work, and they became often merchants because they would sell things, they would invent things and sell things and so forth. But Socrates had trouble with how do you get them interested, how do you get kids interested in that? So what he came up with is music. So in the Republic and in the teachings of the ancient philosophers, which impacted me in my early days, the first thing you should study is music. And so I was a music major at the time when I started studying philosophy. Now, what Socrates taught was music is all about, it has a gateway. It's a transition into science. Because if you study music, you find out that there's these things called octaves. And octaves are about wavelengths, and wavelengths have their foundation in physics. So you can measure wavelengths found in the case of octaves and thirds and fifths and harmonies that are transformable into mathematical equations. The length of the trumpet is a factor that affects the number of inches or millimeters of length of the trumpet affects the sound, the pitch and the tone and so on. So by putting vowels on it, you change the length of the tube, and that gives different notes. Right. So the point I'm making is that music is a gateway to science and philosophy, because music, first of all, gets you interested in science because of this. The second thing is, as you become more interested in science, you become more interested in truth. As you become more interested in the concept of lasting truth, then you become more interested in philosophy. So these three things are integral. They have been taught since recorded time, and but there's one other piece before I conclude my comments, and that is the music. The music for me is about what I think is what you're asking to go after. And if I'm giving advice to other people about creativity, what we need to do is find areas in life where you can expand your creativity. And so for me, what music has always been about is just like creating stuff and exercising that part of my existence, of my brain and so forth. So other people might find that creativity is in writing. It might be in sculpture or painting or something else. But if you emphasize and practice being creative, it's like a muscle in the brain. If you work it out, it gets stronger. And so being creative, for me, drumming is creative because I'm creating sounds and I'm experimenting with how these tones work against those tones, and the drum and the cymbal together versus the drum and cymbal separately, and the rhythms that go into it, etc. So for me, it's all about going to a different place, and that place is about creating something. So when you're creating something, you're exercising that creative part of your brain, and that to me is a huge part of what every person should be doing, if not every day, at least every week.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very much in with that. So me, as my background, many years ago, I started playing saxophone when I was in 6th grade and actually continued it up through a while in college. I was a soloist in the jazz band at University of Kentucky, but I'd spent 8 or 10 years in music and had just had a great time with that. And then now for me, I'm kind of creating content on a daily, almost, and definitely a weekly basis, but pretty much 5 days a week I'm creating some type of content. And I found that my thought process and everything like that has grown so much more just from the ability to create on a daily basis.
Good, excellent. And that's what everyone should be doing. You're creating websites, you're creating podcasts, you're creating content for these lectures and for these interviews. So you are definitely walking the talk, and that's what I think everybody really should be doing.
Right. Yep. I think that everybody has that, or not everybody, but a lot of people have that. There's always that thought process of, I want to write a book or I want to do this, and then, but for the vast majority of them, they never actually take that step to begin the creativity. They have an idea for something, and then they just never really take the implementation or the action on doing that, and it becomes a habit, right? It's that creativity is really, in many ways, needs to become a consistent habit for you to really express it.
Yes, and I think that getting to do it, like lots of people have the idea to do something, but Nike says just do it, and so there's some truth to that.
Right.
My experience has been that if you take that too literally, just do it, you start getting too scattered and you start doing too many things, and that doesn't work either. So there's a balance in here of trying to prioritize and find the right things, but then you have to be willing to fail. And I think that's a very important concept. It's one of the things I taught my son is I said, tell me what you're failing at. Because if you're not failing at things right now, you're not reaching high enough. If you're succeeding at everything, then you're probably, not stretching, and you're not really going out for stuff. You need to be failing at things and accepting that that's part of the deal.
Right.
And if you accept it as just, okay, good, I'm glad that I poked, what Steve Jobs says is I poked the universe. In other words, what he meant was I try to do something and I see what the universe gives me back and stuff. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it's always interesting to poke the universe and say, what if I did this? What if I called this guy and offered to do blah, 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 whatever?
Right.
What if I wrote this out? What if I sent this article in? What if I did this or that? It's just poking the universe, and it's valuable. If you write an article and you send it in and they say, no, it was too long, it was too this, it was too that, that's useful information because you've poked the universe and the universe gave you an answer back and said, okay, that's off track, but you get information. It's constant cybernetics is the term.
Right.
Psycho-cybernetics is a great book that you may be aware
Love
of.
it,
But
yeah.
Yeah, so at any rate, that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Sure. So off of that spin, talking about being creative, then you're an inventor as well. So give me some insight on some of the things that you do from that creativity standpoint.
Well, inventor means different things. Like I invented a food puzzle that was a product that animals would have to figure out how to get their food out of it to entertain and bide their time. But other things that I'm doing recently, my most fun and exciting to me invention in the last year is the Veterinary Futurist Society. Have you heard of this?
We talked about it at the last Coves when we were all at dinner.
Oh, that's right. Yes. In fact, I invited the members of the Council on Veterinary Service as leaders in the profession to become members of the Veterinary Futurist Society. So one of those people that was at that meeting and one of the current members of the AVMA Council on Veterinary Service is Karen Rosenthal. You know Karen.
Right.
Karen is the dean of the veterinary school at the St. Matthews, which is located in the Cayman Islands. So she's been reading the posts that I put up about the future of veterinary medicine, and she got excited about it. So she's now not only a member, but she has offered to have her vet school host the first international meeting of the Veterinary Future Society in the Cayman Islands.
Awesome. That's very cool.
So I'm really excited about it because it's a very much just a brainchild and a thing where I just thought about what I could do to try to help the future of the profession, and I've always been interested in reading on the most current cutting edge stuff. Mm-hmm. So here's an opportunity to read about it, write about it, and then put it out through this vehicle to the members of the Veterinary Futurist Society. And then from there, I expect that, there probably will be, and I hope there will be, people listening right now who have never heard of the Veterinary Futurist Society,
right,
who will go online and look at the veterinarifuturesociety.com, because it's not, I'm not trying to get people to spend their money. It's free, right? There's no cost to join the Veterinary Future Society, and then you can contribute what you think is going to be the future of X. So we have topics like 3D printing and wearable tech and telecommunications and the future of education of veterinarians and the future of the economics and so on.
Right.
So anyone who's listening to this podcast has probably some interest in the future of something. And so as a result, it's really a platform for anyone and everyone that has an interest to come on board and put down what you're interested in and share it with the people. And here's what I'm really hoping happens is that, and this hopefully is of interest to your viewers as well,
mm-hmm.
that is that if somebody like you, if you have an interest, let's say it was in 3D printing, for example, and it maybe even 3D printing is such a big field that it may even have to be a subcategory of that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say 3D printing of pharmaceuticals. That's what I wrote my most recent post on.
Okay.
So if you're interested in that, then everybody would send information about that topic to you. You would become a funnel, and everyone in the Future Society would just, I heard about this company's doing this. Let's send it to Ryan or whatever.
Right.
And then Ryan or whoever is the person that's interested in it gradually becomes the world's authority on that subject, because you have all these people that are funneling all the newest information. If you can narrow your focus enough to become a world authority on something, then you can write about it, you can share your knowledge with others, become speaker, and maybe even be a consultant for a firm that's trying to do that particular thing. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish with the Veterinary Futurist Society.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's very cool. It's similar to what we're doing here as far as how we are combining different expertises with my background and Dr. Jen's background, and how we are creating health and wellness and more of thought leader type things within how veterinarians can become healthier, how they can perform better, all the things that they need to think about. So it's very much that same thought process of what you're doing from the Veterinary Futurist Society.
Excellent. So there's a lot of synergy there.
Absolutely. Yep. So that's very cool. So, I'm kind of familiar with futurists. I've been reading futurist things for a while, but how would you really kind of define, if somebody's like going, a futurist society, what's that mean? What would you say truly would be the futurist? How would you define it?
Well, the definition of a futurist is someone who studies trends in the society on a specific topic, one or more topics, and then follows that trend into the future to try to either predict or influence or discuss where that trend is likely to continue into the future. So that is the essence of a futurist, is they're studying not only what's going on now, but they're studying where it's going.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. And I believe even with, if I remember correctly, Gay, who is also on the Council on Veterinary Services, her husband is actually a futurist by his profession, if I remember correctly.
Who's that?
Gay, that is on the Council on Veterinary Services, her husband is a futurist.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
So we'll have to get in contact with her.
Yep. So that was one of those little tidbits that I remember from another part of the conversation that was there. So anyway, so that's that's some really cool stuff, and that allows people to then express their creativity as well, right? It's a way. Yeah.
Right.
Very cool. So which then expressing your creativity, kind of go through, then we combine it with the science, and we can move all the way into the philosophy portion of it as well.
I hope so.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've got a great pathway that's going on here from that concept then. So then let's kind of take it a little bit, circle from music and philosophy, and then how did you kind of manage to wiggle your way into veterinary, the veterinary profession, veterinary sciences?
Well, it's an interesting story because at the time I was a music major. I was a drummer in a rock and roll band. Long hair, hippie, in the 70s, and I started thinking about, what do I want to do? And so I wanted to do music, so I went to college and became a music major. So after that, what happened is I was, as I told you, I was doing this study of philosophy at the same time, and so I thought, well, Socrates says that I need to get me some science. I don't have any science background. I was just a high school kid who got interested in music and playing drums, and I go, science, Socrates says music, science, philosophy. I got the music, I got the philosophy. I got to get me some of that science stuff. So I started looking at different science aspects. So this is when I was about 21 years old, and I was a junior in college, I think. So I went out and I said, all right, so what would be the best science to study? If you're trying to understand life, on every level, how does it work? What does it mean? And then mechanically, what is blood? What is that stuff really? And what is the liver? And how does the nervous system work? And so on. So I became interested in the biologic sciences. But I was really open for anything. And I did look at law, and I looked at human medicine, and I looked at research and PhD and teaching and industry. So I spent a year of my life going around, and I volunteered in a hospital. And I went and was an orderly. What's it like to be a doctor? And I went and I worked in a law firm for a while. What's it like to be a lawyer? What's it like to be a researcher, and so on? So I just investigated life. I poked the universe in several different areas. And the area that kept coming back to me was veterinary medicine, and here's why. Unlike any other profession, veterinary medicine has the broadest scope of science. Now, what I mean by that is it encompasses physics and chemistry and mathematics and every biology, zoology, every life science, and times every animal. Mm-hmm. So in veterinary medicine, whether it's a porpoise or a cat or a snake or a bull or, there are so many different ways that life works. And then you add into that all the plants, because we have to study toxins and things that plants do that cause animals to become sick. Mm-hmm. So the more I studied it, the more I realized that in terms of understanding life on the broadest possible level, veterinary medicine would be the ideal science to go with the music and philosophy for me. And then in addition to that, veterinary medicine offered the most variety of professions. As a veterinarian, you can work in a zoo, you can do wildlife research, marine mammals. The veterinarian is the most valued member of any marine mammal team. Mm-hmm. You can work with horses and cattle, and you can raise food. You can teach in a university. You can work in government with everything from public health to food production, the research, even telecommunications. That's how I got into behaviors, because of telecommunications. So for all those reasons, I thought it came around to veterinary medicine. Now, here's where it got really interesting. When I started studying this in the 70s, this was, for hippies, this was the coolest thing ever. To be a veterinarian, to work with animals was like the coolest thing. So it was a very popular thing to do, and what I found out was it's also, at that time, it was the most difficult academic achievement to get enrolled in a veterinary school. So I go, holy crap, I don't have any science background. I'm a drummer in a rock and roll band. How am I going to do that?
Right.
And I realized it was going to be a humongous task if I was going to do it, and I was afraid of it. I'm going, really? I mean, come on. I found out at that time that of the qualified applicants, that means people that had completed all their science. They had the GPA, they had the experience, they had the stick-to-itiveness to go through the application process. These are valid, good applicants for veterinary medicine. Out of those people that applied, only 1 in 10 of those got into vet school. So I'm going, holy crap, what am I going to do? And so I was afraid of it. And there was a moment, Ryan, where my girlfriend and I were camping. We were out at this campground, and I was trying to make this decision. Do I go for it? Do I? Really? I mean, this is humongous amount of time. And I started saying to myself, if I don't, what's it going to be like when I'm laying on my deathbed, looking back and thinking about I could have done that and I didn't even try. So at the time we were camping, and there was this ice-cold pond of water there. And I don't like being cold water, okay? So it's a joke between the girlfriend and I that, you know, like, ooh, what a sissy, you know, you don't like cold water, you know, splash, and you know, run away. So I made this deal with myself. I would say, look, if I'm going to go for this and try to pursue veterinary medicine, that to me would be like jumping my whole body into that ice-cold pool of water. Do I have the guts to do that? I don't know. So I sat there on the side of that little pond of water. It was like a river or ice water coming off the mountains that formed into this cool little pond that was near the campground. And I just sat there staring at that cold water for quite some time, understanding how fearful and how unpleasant that cold water would be to jump into. And what a huge emotional plunge that would be, both physically, literally, in every sense of the word. Talk about take the plunge. It's the most literal ever that I can imagine. So I sat there for a long time, and I realized that, you know what, this is it, right here, right now, this moment. I've searched out all these other things. This is what really drives me. This is what I really want to do, but I'm afraid of it. Just like I'm afraid of cold water. It just is a funny thing. So I said, in order for me to do that, I first have to do this. So with to my girlfriend's surprise and shock, I stripped down to my skivvies, and I say, watch this. And I leaped into the air, and I plunged down into this ice-cold water as deep as I could go, completely submerged. And I remember that instant when I raised my fist over my head, completely submerged under the water, and said, yes, I'm going to do this.
Very cool.
I decided to become a veterinarian.
Awesome. That's a great story. I mean, and just the visualization and, you know, that people can actually see this as you're explaining, because, you know, here we are years later and it's still as vivid to you today as it was back then.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, and that's, you know, and so that's led to, so that was what you said, the late 70s? Or
yeah, that was like, let's see, let me tell you, I graduated from high school in '69, and so I was a music major for 3 years, so it would have been around 1973.
So, wow. Yeah, so we've, it's a while ago.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. That's a while ago now, but you know what, it's been so fun, because veterinary medicine, I knew at the time, was not where you make money.
Right.
If you want to make money, you go into business or law or even medicine. At that time, was a good business to go into. But as I said, what I was driven by at the time was my interest in philosophy, which has been a major driving force in my whole life. And the idea of within philosophy, I've now focused my energy. I've moved away from ancient Greek philosophy. I'm now focused on ethics and logic. Those are my two favorite parts of philosophy. So think about that. Mm-hmm. How important is ethics? Right. How important is ethics, right?
Yep.
So I read a lot of Dalai Lama, who writes on ethics a lot,
right.
and try to just understand, what does that word mean, and how does it work, and how does it manifest itself in the world? And I would argue that if you have a very high ethical standard, and again, that's a whole discussion, right? But if you have an ethical standard, others will be drawn to that. You become very trustworthy. What you say is what you will do, which is the truth. And it's very easy for people to work with you and to move forward if they understand that it's not going to be games, it's going to be to the best of your knowledge, which is what you really believe in, and you're doing it for ethical reasons.
Right.
So I found that has greased, I think, made a lot of things that I want to do a lot easier in life, is having the ethics. And then the logic is important too, because philosophy is about the study of concepts. And being able to take concepts and assign them, in the study of logic, you assign a concept a symbol. And so it becomes very much mathematical. This is where the overlap of science and philosophy occurs in the study of logic. Because if you can say, if A is true, and if A is equal to B, then B is true, and you can count on that.
Right.
And if C is a combination of A and B, and both A and B are true, then what is inside the thing that we define as C is going to also be true. And then you go on and become just like mathematical formulas. Study of logic does that, and they say, they put conditions on each of the concepts, and then you follow all these rules of logic to determine what is actually true and what is a falsehood or an exaggeration or an opinion. Those are all different variations on untruths. But truth is a very difficult thing to study. It's very, very difficult.
Right.
But it's interesting.
Yeah. Very cool. So how did that thought process lead you into animal behavior then?
Well, animal behavior is primarily conceptual. That's funny, but people don't understand that. But as you study it more, you realize that unlike medicine, which it's very important to put your hands on and look into the gums and the mouth and feel the abdomen and listen to the heart and so forth, with behavior, the opportunity is there to help a lot more people more efficiently through telecommunications. And so my interest in telecommunications was, well, if I was going to do something that helped animals and people, where would be the broadest opportunity? And the answer is in behavior. Now, once again, I have a knack for picking things that don't make a lot of money. So I'm okay with that because it's what I do, and it's who I am, and I make enough money. I'm happy with that. But the point I'm getting at is that in behavior, what I had in mind was producing an animal behavior network that helped people throughout the entire United States or in the world, and I can't do that from an exam room. And so the idea behind Animal Behavior Network was to work through veterinarians with their cooperation so the veterinarian can do what's needed to look in the mouth and feel the abdomen and listen to the heart and so forth for the physical aspect. But the mental and emotional aspect, I can look at a video from anywhere. And if I need a video, if you tell me that this animal barks excessively when left alone, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that it has separation vocalization, and there is a program that I can put together and deliver to you anywhere in the world on how to manage separation vocalization or household destruction or, fill in the blank.
Right.
So the reason I got interested in behavior in the first place was because of the opportunity to create PowerPoints and lectures and topics and books and things like that would help a large number of people simultaneously, far more than I could help one by one coming into my exam room.
Right. Yep. And obviously the multiplicative effect of being able to help the veterinarians themselves, and then, the number of patients that they have, because just from the educational standpoint of what they've got, it's you as a veterinarian and animal behaviors are multiplying your knowledge versus just, hey, again, training one dog or one cat or whatever it is at a time.
Correct, exactly. It's magnified, and that multiplication opportunity, I thought, well, and it's early. Remember that when I wrote the article on veterinary telecommunications, I published that in January of 1984. And so in that article, I predicted a lot of the future, and I felt that the ability to telecommunicate concepts would be increasingly important in veterinary medicine. Now, so I predicted at that time that there would eventually be a computer in essentially every veterinary hospital, and there may even be one in the exam rooms, and that there would be things like networks where veterinarians could communicate over the networks, and laboratories would be sent in, and so forth. So nowadays we all say, of course, now we see that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But that was 30 years ago. So try to imagine right now, trying to predict 30 years in the future, and how much success will you have?
Right.
So the point I'm trying to make is that I predicted that veterinary telecommunications would be a very profitable way for veterinarians to produce income using their knowledge, and I still think that it just still hasn't arrived yet.
Right.
So I envision that veterinarians could be, I think that, let me just kind of toss this out. So hopefully you have veterinarians listening to this, mm-hmm. and maybe others as well. But here's my vision for the future for veterinary medicine. I think that veterinarians in the United States have the best education in the world. There are third world and other countries that are now developing middle class. And what happens with middle class is, after you get running water and toilets, and then you get transportation, you've got to take care of your basic needs first. Mm-hmm. But at some point, when we say the words middle class, we no longer mean the poor. We mean having enough resources to have a certain quality of life. When you reach that level of quality of life, one of the natural things that happens is you want to have a animal companion. And that just has happened in so many cultures over time, but it takes a certain amount of income to be able to afford to have this another mouth to feed, right, and mm-hmm. educate and so forth. So the point I'm trying to make now is that I think still the great opportunity for veterinarians in the United States is to use telecommunications, and as the Google and other groups are providing internet throughout the world, and as those countries develop a middle class and they get pets, they're not going to have the quality of veterinary care throughout India and throughout China and so on. Mm-hmm. So I think that the current veterinary management, let me think of the right word, management, no, it's the veterinary politics. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I would change, the reason I went to AVMA was to try to have a positive influence from the inside out, and I did not accomplish this next thing I'm talking about. But I think that veterinarians tend to be a little protectionist mm-hmm. in the sense that we don't allow things because we're afraid it's going to impact the income of the members, and the vet association sees itself as protecting its members, and the people that own veterinary practices, like I did, are the ones that pay the most dues. You pay the dues for all of your employees and so forth. Mm-hmm. So there's an incentive in there to become protectionist.
Right.
Now, what I think we should do instead is become global. That means that we open up and say, sure, it's fine to provide consulting. I think that, in fact, I talked to Dr. Jett about this. I think we should embrace it and just have the AVMA and other veterinary political organizations try to establish standards and goals and appropriate behaviors that will allow the veterinarians in the United States, at least those that are educated by the AVMA-accredited universities, mm-hmm. to be able to provide paid consulting via telecommunications throughout the world.
Right.
So all of a sudden, our market is not just those people that own pets in the United States. Now our market is to provide our education, and I would say behavior is the best one, but a lot of medicine too, first aid and so forth. I mean, a veterinarian, if you describe the symptoms, can do a lot of good compared to a layperson. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, I just have this vision of both general practice and specialty practice, where the specialists all over the world become more and more specialized, and that you communicate with specialties in really cool. I mean, imagine the specialist in koi fish. Mm-hmm. If you're a specialist in koi fish, and I happen to know one, and if that person were really using social media and podcasts and your company and others to distribute the knowledge that they have expertise in koi fish in ponds in your backyard, that person can become a world authority and charge for their time, and people who keep koi ponds will spend money to know, what do I do when this happens and that happens.
Exactly.
So if you imagine there's I call it micro specialization. That's what I think we should do.
Mm-hmm.
So nowadays, if you become a specialist, you have to be an internist, or maybe you get so specialized to become a cardiologist. But I imagine that there will be people that will take it many steps further to become micro-specialists in specific parts of cardiology or dermatology or animal husbandry or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's almost an infinite number of potential specialties, and then within that, you can have more than one person, be knowledgeable about separation vocalization or something like that. So at any rate, the point is, it becomes a global community, and the people with the best reputations, the best knowledge, the most efficiency will have well-paid veterinary technicians who provide a lot of the mechanics of the service, like I'm talking about,
mm-hmm.
and the opportunity for income through telecommunications in the future is phenomenal if we would stop getting in our own way by limiting what veterinarians can do through telecommunications.
Yep, absolutely. So my profession as what I call a human performance coach. So with my background as exercise physiology, but dealing with endurance athletes, but dealing with kind of personal health of individuals as well, has actually already gone beyond that. So we actually are, in essence, global, national and global, in that we can do many, many things like that. And, it took a long time for our profession, even though we can have degrees, and there are people that maybe not have degrees that have got certifications or whatnot, but have that ability to really, assess people and work with people all over the world via telecommunications. But we don't have a governing body that necessarily restricts us from doing that. We don't have the same types of things like an AVMA that would prevent us from doing that. So I can understand both sides of it. And, when we talk about the Veterinary Futurist Society, whenever you've got the people that are in potentially AVMA that are still the old guard or still the old way of thinking, they don't have a futurist way of thinking.
Right. And, you bring up a good example. What you're doing with helping people with their physical conditions separate from their professional incomes
mm-hmm.
and all the other aspects, and you are right now a perfect example of doing that remotely with telecommunications. And you have the further advantage, as you just indicated, of not having to worry about somebody that is trying to shut you down or take away your license to do this when you're doing that. So we are creating now an environment in veterinary medicine where a layperson can provide the kind of consulting I'm talking about, and the veterinarian who has the more knowledge can't
mm-hmm.
because of some limitations that are being put. So I think we have to just think about the future and where we're going with it, and do just exactly what you just said, and we're going to keep moving forward, analyze where are the opportunities and how do we get there ethically and professionally in order to provide the real, I would say truthful, best possible outcome. That's where it really gets exciting and where the world is so fun to be living in right now.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it really is. I mean, that because of telecommunication, because of all these things, you can move so much more and think about and, broaden your knowledge. It used to be, the only way that you could, get your knowledge to the world was to write a book. Right, and then a book could potentially be open to interpretation or whether it was implemented or not. But now through this, you have the ability to actually provide the information and also help with the implementation. And that's that implementation and action, which is where the rubber meets the road.
Yes, exactly right. You nailed it. Way to go.
So we've been talking a little bit about that for a while. So I want to kind of actually veer off a little bit here and actually talk in, want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So I want to kind of make sure we don't go too long here. But for you as an animal behaviorist, as a veterinarian, for all the things that you do, whenever you are outside of your business life, so to speak? How do you kind of juggle life, business, all of that? How do they intertwine, that work-life balance, so to speak?
It's tough because there's only so many minutes, and I'm always so angry with myself when I'm laying in bed and I can't get to sleep because maybe I drank too much coffee, I didn't get enough exercise, whatever. And I think about what precious time I could be doing something that I really want to do, and there I am laying staring at the ceiling. So the point I'm trying to make is that every moment is so precious that it just distresses me when I see people that are sitting on curbs or just lounging and doing nothing with their lives, hanging out in front of the liquor stores and so forth. So, that's the other extreme. That is like not having a good balance because you are not producing anything. So you're asking about how do I find a balance?
Yeah. So what do you do outside of normal business everyday practice to kind of, build that creativity, that thought, that fullness of life in your life?
Well, first of all, every morning I spend a fair amount of time stretching. And what I'm doing when I'm stretching my body is I'm trying to stretch my mind at the same time. So that is a double benefit. So I'm trying to just, as I'm stretching, it takes time to move your body into the farthest it will go in this area. And you have to hold it there for a while and release the muscle tone and so forth. So the one thing I'm doing is a lot of stretching. The second thing I do is walking. And the walking, again, allows me to do sort of just a free-form thinking. I'm challenged by keeping my thoughts in a sufficient order because they scatter all over the place, and I try to corral them back, and then they scatter again. So the idea of having your mind wandering is, I'm very familiar with that concept. A third thing is I like to call staring into space, for lack of a better term. And it's a combination of I think meditation is overstated because it's not that formal.
Right.
But I try to spend some time where I'm not doing anything. I'm talking about some time means 3 minutes to 10 minutes, where I try to put myself in a good spot and I just try to think about nothing as best that I can. And of course what happens is immediately your mind floods you with so many things to think about, and then you just keep staring into space, and that's where my best ideas come. Is I try to open up to space and allow for things to come in when I'm not being productive. The whole key here is being able to be at that time not productive in terms of doing anything, but that clearing the mind, I think, is so important. And it turns out that mind is so cluttered and it's so active that it takes a lot of time to try to clutter that stuff out and to get to the point where you can just really focus on the moment about being there. So I think the combination of those, and then for me, music. I mean, this morning already I've been playing, I have a new hand drum that I really love. And so I'm just experimenting. How many different sounds can I get out of this one instrument? And what happens when I attach, when I put these two together and do a melodic theme and then reverse it? What would happen then? And so the music for me is a big part of the day too.
Sure, awesome. Yeah, and I think whenever you're talking about that, it's not necessarily meditation. It's not there's a portion of it that's a creativity. There's a portion of it where you're trying to the mind and sometimes wants to be creative, but you don't have time to let it be creative. So giving it as an outlet for that facilitates a lot more focused in other parts of your life at times.
Right. That is exactly right. You nailed it.
So again, this is like great information. We want to know, how does this overlap into your business life then too? What do you think that the ability of doing those habits on a daily basis, how does that affect your business life?
Well, I guess I push back on the concept of a business life.
Okay.
I know that there are things that I have to do to be able to pay the mortgage or pay for the stuff that you got to pay for. It takes money to live in this world.
Right.
And because of a combination of just good fortune, of hard work, and so forth, I'm in a position now where I have plenty. I have what I need. I'm good to go. And so for me, I only do stuff that I want to do at this point, which is really kind of the American dream, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
I just do stuff I want to do, and it happens that some of that stuff actually makes money. So great, that's a double win, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And it's more, the truth is, in some ways, it's more fun when it makes money than when it isn't. Mm-hmm. And that's not universally true, but, if you're playing music for a lot of people, it's more fun. And if you're playing for a lot of people, people are probably paying to hear what you play, and it's more fun. And so I think the same thing is what we call business, which is the exchange of commerce. But what I'm getting at is that what I try to do is say, what would be really a fun thing to do, and how can I find the right balance where I can do enough of it to make enough money to pay my bills and get where I am, where I don't have to worry about it, but also enjoy it while we go. So I think that's probably what you meant by the business life, is the part that makes money. Mm-hmm. And so I think that for me, that's not my strength. There's people that really have a golden Midas touch, and everything they do just makes a lot of money. So that's not my strength. My strength, if I have one, is doing creative things that can make some money, but they give me so much joy that I just live such a blessed life, and I'm so thankful for it that it makes me want to give back, and then I end up giving back and volunteering for stuff, and it just is a balance. It kind of circles like that.
Right. Yep. And that was the kind of the answer that I was expecting kind of from knowing from you, but that's also how both Dr. Jen and I both kind of look at life, and that's why we're doing what we do. And I know for me, the last probably 5+ years, I don't really feel like I've worked a day in my life because I do what I love to do every day, and my home, personal, work, they all intertwine because I'm not doing anything that I don't really love to do.
Right. So you are living the American dream,
yeah.
And I'm not sure that it's an American dream. I think it's a human dream.
I think so too.
Because the people in China and the people who are filled in the spot. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants that, to have love in your life, to have good health, and to have enough money. The thing about money is that it isn't that it buys happiness, but a lack of it can certainly cause some discomfort.
Absolutely.
And so, so there's a matter of comfort, and then there's doing well, and then there's wealthy, and then there's rich, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I'm not certain that being rich in terms of money alone is the good goal. Mm-hmm. That kind of like is, it to some extent, everybody wants to be rich, but if you look at the people that are, quote, rich, a lot of them have got there in very questionable, unethical ways, mm-hmm. and often are unhappy because of one reason or another with where their position is. So the saying that money can't buy happiness, I think, has a lot of validity to it. But not enough money is a big problem too.
Absolutely.
So I think finding that balance. I mean, if I was going to pick words, sometimes I'm challenged to say, what would be the one word that describes the philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. So what would be one word? And the one word I keep coming back to is the word balance. That word is so powerful that I would say that if I have to pick one word, it would be that. And that beat out a bunch of others that would be a good competitor. And it could change next week, who knows? But anyway, mm-hmm. that concept which you describe, I think as I understand your business, it's all about balancing, and that's what your question is. How do you balance health and business and making money and quote the job versus your passion versus your love life versus your pet life versus your sports life versus your movie life versus, there's a balance of all those things, and nobody ever gets it perfect all the time, but you see little glimpses of it, and it's so sweet when that happens. It's called being in the zone. Yep. It's in being in the zone, right?
Yes.
So, if anybody can find a way to be in the zone more of the time, that's worth a lot. And I think that's what you are focusing on. Am I right?
It is, yeah. It's a big part of it, and it's finding that and having that as a goal, and then what are those methods that we help an individual to get there? What are their challenges, their hang-ups, and how do we create them, to get to that place? It's I guess the one way I think about it, and it's been said, like one of the great quotes by Zig Ziglar was that, nobody wants a drill, they buy a drill because they want a hole, and so the drill is just a tool. Well, to me, I want to go much farther beyond that. It's like, okay, I don't want the drill, I don't want the hole, I want the hole to put up the shelf. And it's not even that I want the shelf. I want the shelf so I can put the pictures on, and I don't want just the pictures. I actually want the memories that those pictures created. So it's how do we get that whole standpoint, because it's those memories that we want, and which is all about life, not just we don't want a shelf. We want where the pictures can go that create the memories.
I love it. That's a great. I like that domino effect where it's really not this, it's this. And then it's really not that, it's this.
Right.
And then you keep going down that path that you just described until you get what I think is a really important test.
Mm-hmm.
And this test is called the deathbed test.
Right.
The deathbed test means that when each of us is laying, hopefully at an age of 110 or so, but whenever that time comes, when you know the end is near and hopefully you still have enough consciousness, right there, the test is, have I done it right? Do I have those pictures on that shelf of the memories of the people that I love and the experiences that I've had and the things that I've done? How well have I used the time that was given to me? And as I said earlier, that's a really, really important test, is the deathbed test, and saying how much joy have I brought to others? How much joy have I brought to myself, for that matter?
Yep.
So I totally support that concept that you just talked about, because on that deathbed, you're looking at that shelf that has those pictures that remind you of those memories.
Yep. So, well, great. So I know we're coming up on time here, and I want to be cognizant of your time. I've got two quick questions if you've got a moment to answer those for me. You got time?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first one, these are the two questions we really ask everybody that we do the interviews with. And the first one is, so far you've worked hard and smart potentially to get where you are today. But what is one of the hardest things that you've had to overcome on your way to becoming what we would consider a high performer?
Well, what you're asking is really the heart of the matter, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You have to get over some things to be able to get anywhere. And so first I would say that every time that you stumble or fall, I think of it as a kind of like a hurdles race, where if you stumble and fall, it just means that there's others that are behind you that have stumbled and ahead of you that stumbled. So your goal is to keep going. And even though you stumble once, there may be others that are stumbling as well, and they all are. You got to keep going and not give up. But the heart of the matter, what I want to say is this. There's an Eagles song, and I'm a big Eagles fan, but they have a song called The Heart of the Matter. And when you listen to the lyrics of the song, when it talks about, when it gets down to the heart of the matter, the punchline is, it's all about forgiveness. And this is what's so hard, because all of us experience our feelings hurt, rejections, failures, the stuff that is tough to swallow. Mm-hmm. And so if you can, and I think this has been the hardest lesson I've had to learn, is if you can find a way to forgive those people, those societies, those organizations, etc., in your own mind, in your own way, then you can just forgive that and move on, instead of what you want to do, which is punch them right back, slap them right back, I'll teach you, I'll get you back, blah, blah, blah. If you can let it go and then move forward, sometimes it's surprising that that same thing that you thought was so bad turned into something good, and the person that you would have trashed turns out to be very valuable to you in progressing your future. So I think that the hardest thing to do is to practice forgiveness.
Yep. That's what they always say is forgiveness is never about the other person. It's always about you. Yep.
Exactly.
So, and then our last question here is, so everybody has their own interpretation of what it takes to be a high performer in life, whether it be in business, in life, or whatever it is, or just across the board of being a high performer. What would you consider to be a high performer in life and across the board?
Well, there's a saying that says it's not what you did in life,
Mm-hmm.
it's what you did with what you had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that every person should be, to the extent they can, asking how their genetic potential, finding what it is that they're good at and not good at, and they should spend less and less time doing things they're not good at and more time experimenting to find the things that they are good at. So I think that the essence of a high performer is someone that has tried and failed enough to where they keep going and find the things that their genetic gifts are good at, and then they focus all of their attentions on those areas until they become as good as their genetic potential can become. Awesome.
Dr. Rolan Tripp, that's great information. I mean, this to me, this has been a great conversation. It's not necessarily an interview. This is a conversation between us that fortunately people will get to listen in on. I thank you for sharing your knowledge on everything. I know they're going to find it extremely helpful. I have as well. It just reinforces many of the things that I have within me and with what we do with our stuff. And, so I just want to thank you and, appreciate you for what you're doing, not just on being here, but for all of the things that you have done with life and what you're doing for your profession and just in personal life. So I'm grateful for that, and I appreciate you being with us today.
Well, thank you for those comments. It just warms my heart, and it gives me goosebumps that anybody would say that kind of comments about me. So thank you so very much. It's a gift.
Well, thank you very much. So any of our listeners, you know how to find us. Our website is highperfliving, HIGHPERFLIVING.com. I'll have in the show notes, I'll actually have links to the Veterinarian Futurist Society as well as Dr. Tripp's Animal Behavior Network. So we'll have links to those types of things as well in the show notes. And if you have people that you would like for us to speak with that as high performers, drop us a line and let us know what you'd like to hear as well. And from there, everybody have a great week, and don't forget to live your life with intention. So we'll talk to you real soon.
Thank you for joining us at High Performance Vet Pro Radio. We hope to hear from you soon. Like this episode? Leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. It helps us to reach more veterinary professionals. For more information or to contact us, please visit us at highperfliving.com. Until next time, remember to live every day with intention.